Recording in progress.
Welcome in to a Just Me, the Real _G Warner edition of the Major League Baseball podcast on RJ Bell's Dream Preview. We're normally myself and Munaf Manji on together, but he is traveling. I think he's somewhere in Italia at the moment. So bon voyage, and I hope you are enjoying the pasta over there. I think Munaf had mentioned he's going to Venezia, so Venice and Roma and Rome. So hope he's having a great trip, and I hope it doesn't cool him off because I think he had won his last 5 best bets, all of them. So great run for Munaf, and have a great trip. So it's just going to be me today. I will have promo codes to save you 20% off at pregame.com. Plus, I have a great actually MLB contest to mention, which I'll get to a little bit later. But we'll be going through. I don't have a pick for Munaf. Unfortunately, lines have been really just coming out. So I will be doing this and releasing across all the various platforms. If you're not subscribed to our podcast, please do so. RJ Bell's Dream Preview. And of course, you can hit us up on Twitter at Pregame Now. And I am the Real _G Warner on Twitter. So I'm going to go through long, I guess, few days off of the All-Star break, but I'm going to go through the entire baseball card using lines current based on the pregame.com game center. If you are not using that, it's a good way to get a flicker for line movement across all the ways. There's some questions on who's starting in some of the games on Friday. So going to do the best we can, but thank you all for tuning in, and best bets will come end of show. So I'll go in rotation order, a little bit different than Munaf usually goes, just in order of the start times, as he's kind of the host of our podcast. But hopefully all will go according to plan. And I'll start in Wrigley Field, where we have an early matchup and actually some movement in starting pitchers. Unfortunately, I did not have Ryan Nelson initially scheduled for Arizona. This was, I think, a TBD type of starting pitcher, but ultimately I thought it was going to be Zach Gallen. I can tell you, I can probably make a new number now here, which is a little bit not my favorite thing to do live, but I can certainly do it and take care of that, assuming my computer I guess participates or decides it wants me to be able to do that sort of change. But so I'll start. Zach Gallen, to me, is one of the best pitchers in baseball, and certainly the best pitcher for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Different story here with Ryan Nelson, who's been getting a fair amount of respect, I think, from the marketplace, though he's had some very good unexpected outings, in my humble opinion, but then some really bad ones when I was expecting him to do well. So I'm not really a believer in Ryan Nelson so much. Justin Steele has been awesome, really ever since. He got hurt in his debut start, I think, an opening day for the Cubs, hamstring injury, fielding a bunt, but then returned. And I don't think he had much time on rehab, but ultimately came back and kind of worked his way in. But he's been really hot, as have the Cubs. I'm trying to find a way to make this line as competitive as possible, and the lines actually don't reflect it because current numbers have Arizona about a pick 'em on the road at Chicago, which should not be the case. I'm expecting Justin Steele to be at least a -140 favorite, so we'll wait to see that number change or something like that, and we'll see actually what happens if that's even a real pitching change. But I don't think I had seen Arizona with a decided starting pitcher. And then from my research, I found it was Zach Gallen, but doesn't look like that's going to be who it is. So that's probably one we can skip and move on to the next. And go to a battle of Pennsylvania teams, Philadelphia and Aaron Nola at Pittsburgh and Martin Perez. Currently Nola a -125 favorite away from home. Over-under is 8. A little bit more juice to the under here. Aaron Nola, probably just not a starting pitcher you want to trust too much on his own, but when you consider the Phillies and how strong they've been, really every part of their game, they crush the ball. Their lineup is very healthy. We saw a lot of Phillies in that All-Star game, well represented on Tuesday night. Martin Perez was really great to start off the season, but then got hurt and really hasn't done much or pitched well at all since coming off the IL. Pittsburgh is a really good bullpen at home. Their good bullpen is electric. I got Holerman and Aroldis Chapman also leading in David Bednar, who returned from an oblique injury right before the break. And pretty much Pittsburgh's going to try to win low-scoring games at home. I don't know necessarily that I trust Martin Perez enough to keep, because he's a pitch-to-contact guy. He's survived throughout his major league career, not really impressing anyone with strikeout totals. But this is a really, really tough scenario. Great park for him because keeping the ball in the yard is probably one of the easier things to do at Pittsburgh, one of the harder parks to hit home runs. But Philadelphia's certainly going to test that. And honestly, it feels like the Philadelphia price is fairly cheap here, maybe leaning into potentially Pittsburgh after a huge road sweep of the Chicago White Sox to get back to 500 entering into the All-Star break. Maybe that's a good sign for Pittsburgh. I'll look to back them in this series later. I don't hate the idea of fading Nolan. I feel like Philadelphia is going to be overpriced for, I don't know, the rest of the season at this point, especially after the great start they got off to. I just don't know if there's enough here for me on Pittsburgh just yet. Moving next to the Cincinnati Reds visiting the Washington Nationals, and happy Patrick Corbin Day to those who celebrate. I know we're probably not going to have many more of these, but he's still starting somehow in the second half of the Major League Baseball season, the year of our Lord 2024, and I think we're all happy to see that. Frankie Montas is opposing him, and Montas is a road favorite, as he should be, minus 119 currently. Total is 8.5, which is pretty heavily to over. Seen some over money come in as well, though I think there might have been a different Washington starting pitcher announced that then was switched to Corbin. A lot of teams are resetting rosters and certainly trying to keep their starting pitchers on their 5 days of rest. But good question on where that'll end up as we get to closer to these game times. And hopefully there aren't a bunch of starter changes, but we've already seen one literally from a few minutes ago from Zach Gallen to Ryan Nelson for Arizona. With that said, Washington and Patrick Corbin, I feel like the Nationals have been very good to me this season, but I'm just not really a believer. I don't know what the price would take for me to want to back Patrick Corbin. The Reds certainly are not a strong offense, but their bullpen's been really good. Washington just traded their second best bullpen arm, arguably their best, just wasn't in the closer role, at Hunter Harvey to Kansas City. So a lot of problems there, I think, potentially for the Washington Nationals. Their lineup's pretty weak. Patrick Corbin's one of the worst starters in Major League Baseball, should not have been starting for years, but big contracts and money talks, and that's forced him into the rotation. Not much for me to do here other than wait for potentially Cincinnati to move to an underdog, which I doubt will happen. Maybe play over here, something like that. Moving next to the New York Mets visiting the Miami Marlins, Sean Manaea at Edward Cabrera. Currently, Manaea minus 124 favorite on the road. Over-under is 8, juiced very heavily to over. Edward Cabrera is a great arm, as there are lots in the Miami organization. He's been a disaster since coming back from his own IL stint. Probably would have a lot to say about pitchers in the second half of the season. A lot probably have hit the IL already and are coming back to start. Or Edward Cabrera has been working up his way to getting to full strength. He's not someone I want to back at this point. Sean Manaea has never been a strikeout pitcher. He's been working on it, trying as his hardest throughout his career to try to become a more strikeout pitcher. But the high sinker that he tends to throw just doesn't really fit. That's really hard to miss bats when you're not throwing 96, and especially if you throw a fastball up that sinks. That's just perfect for a bat path. I don't know that Miami is going to do a very good job of punishing that, and they really struggle to do anything offensively, especially I think at home. It's a really tough place to hit home runs, of course. So I think I'll probably go along the lines of not expecting a lot of offense in this game, though. Honestly, the Mets lineup has been awesome heading into the break, though. There's a few days to cool off, certainly, and that big cavernous park in South Florida, which has still a ton of humidity inside of it. But just to me feels like one of those cold type of big environments that you don't feel a lot of crowd and there's not really a wind to help you. So if you're hitting home runs, you're really supplying all the power yourself as a hitter. Hard to back it under with Edward Cabrera at this point, lean to under 8. And I feel like you might even want to play a full game total here rather than the first 5, because you want to get as much of as many runs as possible instead of a 4 or something like that in the first 5 innings. Moving next to St. Louis Cardinals, and Sonny Gray is in Spencer Schwellenbach in the Atlanta Braves. Currently Schwellenbach a minus 132 favorite at home. Total is 7.5, juiced a little bit more to under. Sonny Gray is a great pitcher, but I feel like he's really a favorite I'd like to be against. It was a gigantic favorite into the last weekend, pitching against the Cubs, and really wasn't great, or got outdueled is probably the better way to put it, by Kyle Hendricks. Different scenario here as an underdog. That's probably the side or the way I would want to back St. Louis in a Sonny Gray start, is as an underdog, certainly not as a favorite. Spencer Schwellenbach has been improving. He's one of the numerous Atlanta names that have come up from the minor leagues trying to stabilize their rotation and take Spencer Strider's place while he's on the IL getting Tommy John surgery. I feel like the price is pretty cheap on Atlanta, coming back from San Diego and then to the All-Star game. Certainly a lot of travel stuff going on, but I don't really know that one travel situation scenario is worse than another at this point, especially with a few days off this week. So I think I'll take the short home favorite, Atlanta, and certainly wait to see where this number moves, potentially get a cheaper price, though I don't necessarily know that Atlanta is a team that people are going to want to fade, especially at home. Last matchup in the National League, we got the San Francisco Giants visiting the Colorado Rockies. Currently, the Giants have an undecided starter. It looks like it's going to be Logan Webb. A little bit of questions from me about that, considering he pitched in the All-Star game on Tuesday and got roughed up pretty good. Pretty tough little journey to then go to the All-Star game in Arlington. I think he brought 10, Arlington, Texas, that is, brought, I think, 10 friends and family with him. Now he has to go to Colorado and start in the Rockies. I wouldn't be shocked if that's a scratch or a new starter is named, but San Francisco doesn't have a lot of them. So all we can do is take what's given and what's in front of us. Cal Quantrill, like I said, starting for the Rockies. But San Francisco minus 160 favorite away from home. Gigantic number, especially for a starting pitcher that's coming off a pretty quick turnaround and from working, and that can certainly throw you off. Total's 10.5, choose pretty heavily to under. I would expect there might be some runs here. Certainly two good starting pitchers for both these teams that are going. But great park for runs. I'll probably lean over 10.5, since especially land on 11 is usually where you'd push in this ballpark. So over 10.5 does not sound so bad. Gonna mention our I guess our promo code for today's podcast. It's a little bit easier when I can prep for this enough. I didn't know how much I missed you, but also have a contest I want to mention with some free to enter, but big money prizes at pregame.com coming up. But for our 20% off, use the promo code SWING20, SWING, or swing of at SWING20. Good for 20% off. All listeners of the Major League Baseball podcast. Good for 7 days from the podcast release. So you'd have until the 2nd of August, but probably want to get in here as quickly as possible. A lot of stuff coming up on the site. I have some second half futures wagers. You can buy me for the rest of the season, rest of the year, if you want to include the soccer package after I had a really hot summer in the Euros and the Copa America as well. Plenty of other great handicappers putting out regular season win totals for college football and the NFL, plus plenty of picks to win the Super Bowl, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever you're looking for, whoever you're looking to specialize with, go check that out. Use that promo code SWING20, save 20% off. And the more you use that promo code, the more podcasts that we can guarantee, because our bosses look very, very fondly upon those type of purchases and that sort of behavior. I'll move now to the American League. We'll start in Tampa, or with Tampa Bay visiting the New York Yankees. Zach Eflin at Garrett Cole. These teams just matched up a couple series ago, but this is a big one for coming out of the All-Star break, as the New York Yankees entered one game behind the Baltimore Orioles. Zach Eflin starts for Tampa Bay, visiting the New York Yankees. Garrett Cole, currently Garrett Cole minus 165 favorite at home. Total is 8, just a little bit more to over than to under. Zach Eflin has had some road split issues. He's really turned his career around since leaving Philadelphia and showing up in Tampa Bay. I thought he was very good in his most recent start. I think deserved better. I think lost 2-1. Garrett Cole, on the other hand, he pitched very well on Friday night, entering the last series into the All-Star break. I feel like it was some good fortune facing a Baltimore Orioles lineup that had been really scuffling. But Garrett Cole finally put out a good outing after coming back from the IL and a long stint on the IL as it was. I'm not sure I'm a believer yet in Garrett Cole. The Yankees offense is certainly great, and there's some rumors or some idea that potentially Giancarlo Stanton will return for this matchup. He's a big cog, of course, big man, but very important in the New York Yankees lineup. And I feel like we saw a big slide from the New York Yankees as soon as he got hurt. One less threat behind Judge made it a lot easier for opposing pitchers. We'll see about his availability. And I feel like it's one of those things. Until you can see he's activated, which I don't think the Yankees have done yet, hard to know that he will be there. And certainly I think they'll wait until they need to, the last second possible before Giancarlo Stanton is in that game. I heard that he wasn't going on a rehab stint, which can be a little bit concerning because it's really hard to get up to speed that quickly. Zach Eflin will certainly test that. And Zach Eflin against one of the teams across all of Major League Baseball, I think the Yankees are their first, or at least top 2 in Major League Baseball and working counts and taking pitches, making pitchers work. So I don't know that works really well against Zach Eflin, who's a really great strike thrower, has a very low walk rate. I think one of the best in baseball. Good matchup there. And certainly Garrett Cole is a big favorite. It's something I've faded a lot in my Major League Baseball betting career. So I'm interested in Tampa Bay here. Probably be more interested in a run line plus 1.5 if that was available. I haven't seen a number on that just yet, but looks like the price is pretty big right now. I guess minus 145 at Bet Online for the plus 1.5 run total on Tampa. Would be nice because potentially you only have to face 8 at bats for the New York Yankees, but that would mean they're winning that game also. So that's probably a tough needle to thread, but certainly that's what a run line on an underdog is worth, because you want your team to ideally win, but certainly one run loss and having to face one fewer at bat would not be a terrible way to go. Moving next to the Detroit Tigers, and they are visiting the Toronto Blue Jays. Jack Flaherty at Chris Bassett. Currently Bassett a slight minus 109 favorite at home. Jack Flaherty coming back minus 101 on his side. Total is 7.5. Juices split both ways, so no real tell on which way the Major League Baseball betting market is leaning on that total. But Jack Flaherty's been awesome, and he gets a Toronto team that certainly looks like a seller. Both these teams, based on their records entering into the All-Star break, certainly look like sellers. Detroit's future might be brighter and certainly have a much easier division, whereas Toronto sit last in the American League East. Chris Bassett's been great at home, always a home pitcher, but we'll see what that ends up turning into. He's cheap at home against a pretty weak team here, but Jack Flaherty's been awesome this whole season. So hard to slight him. I think my biggest interest here are the Detroit Tigers. I just feel like Jack Flaherty's got a very good chance of pitching well against Toronto. He did it last year, even while he was kind of recovering from injury, coming back to where he is now, and certainly not the same pitcher, a much better one today. But I remember a really great start as a big underdog for Baltimore last season in Toronto. I don't think that's going to go by the wayside, but anyways, I think that's a good chance we see that again on Friday, the 19th of July. Moving next to the Baltimore Orioles, visiting the Texas Rangers. Corbin Burns at Nathan Eovaldi. Potentially some revenge here for Baltimore if getting knocked out of the playoffs. And Texas did play them pretty tough, pretty snug a couple weeks ago. Baltimore really needed a huge comeback win thanks to a lot of bad defense late after Baltimore blew a lead to the New York Yankees in the top of the ninth. Came back bottom of the ninth, had a game-extending error by shortstop Anthony Volpe for the Yankees, and then a misplay in left field that didn't go down as an error. It should have from Alex Verdugo in left field. A lot of problems that were potentially thirst was quenched maybe by Baltimore, who had really were looking like they're going to get swept back-to-back series by the Cubs and the Yankees, and both at home entering into the All-Star break. But they somehow got that huge win. Big for, I think, their hope moving forward. But Corbin Burns currently minus 148 favorite away from home is ginormous. And Eovaldi has gotten a lot of respect, I felt, throughout this entire season, even though the Rangers haven't been playing very well. I don't see why anyone would be betting Corbin Burns up to this price. Total here is 8. Juices split both ways. Texas has not looked great, but they played very well, winning 2 out of 3 in Houston, entering the All-Star break. I think they capitalized on that momentum. I think Baltimore's, I guess they're very happy to lose that win streak. Maybe they have a little bit less pressure on them right now, but they're going to be in a dogfight in the AL East, and Texas needs to go on a run to even get into the playoff picture. So I think this is a good start for Texas. At home is a great spot to be. And of course, everyone gets to stay home, especially those all-stars. So that's a pretty nice thing there too, though Baltimore certainly were there already. I think Baltimore sticks around, but ultimately it's too big of a price. Corbin Burns has had a really good season, started the all-star game, of course, for the American League, but he's just not striking out enough hitters, and I think Texas can take advantage of that. So give me those Rangers, plus 138 at home on Friday night. Moving next, the White Sox visiting the Kansas City Royals. You got Chris Flexen at Michael Wacha. Wacha, $2 favorite, right on the nose. Incredible. Didn't really expect to see that this year from Kansas City, but I guess considering how poor the White Sox have been, that makes a lot more sense. Total here is 9, just pretty heavily to under. I think Chris Flexen has a good chance, about as good of a chance as any start he'll make to keep the ball in the yard. Really hard to hit home runs in Kansas City. I'm just not necessarily sure I want to get too involved with this one. So I'll move on to the next matchup, and that's the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. They're visiting the Oakland Athletics. It looks like J.P. Sears will be towing the rubber for the Oakland Athletics. Griffin Canning, I'm guessing, for Los Angeles, but don't quote me on that one. That's a little bit of an assumption made by yours truly, but got to in order to discuss it. Sears a slight -112 favorite right now. Total is 8. She's pretty heavily to over. Great under ballpark, of course, with a lot of foul territory to pop out into. The JP Sears side is certainly one that's of interest to me. It seems fairly cheap, though I got to say I was very interested in backing Oakland when they went to Anaheim just a few weeks ago, but we're pretty slight underdogs away the entire series. I think we're swept by the Angels. So that might be two teams, one, I guess, focused on their move to Sacramento, and the Angels having missing so many big players. The Ohtani loss in the offseason was a big deal, but Trout, of course, getting hurt again, like water is wet. That was brutal. But I think feels like a cheap price, but I'm still more of a believer in Oakland, I think, than the Angels at this point in the season, though the Angels might be a little bit more talented. I just don't really want much to do with them, and this price seems right on Oakland. Looks like the last matchup before I get to plugging a big contest that you'll certainly want to stick around and hear about. The Houston Astros visit the Seattle Mariners in a big series in the AL West. One game separating these two teams. Big series to come out of the All-Star break with Hunter Brown pitching for the Houston Astros. Probably couldn't have started this year off worse, but really has stabilized and pitched very well down the stretch into the All-Star break. Seattle and Luis Castillo is starting. Currently Castillo -116 favorite at home. Total is 7. Juiced a little bit more to over than to under. Big question here is Seattle, who lost a really tough game going into the All-Star break, could have put them 2 games up on Houston, or at least it would have been a game and a half up on Houston. We're leading 2-0 in the 8th inning, and Ryan Stanek came in, walked first batter on 4 pitches, and then left the game with a back injury. If he's not available, that's a big question for Seattle Mariners bullpen. Houston's got a lot of depth there. They started off the year horribly, but have really trying to turn their season around despite losing 2 out of 3 to the Texas Rangers in a Texas rivalry heading into the All-Star break. It feels like, though, Seattle's been great at home. It's a pretty cheap price, -116, and a great pitcher like Luis Castillo. Though, to be fair, his changeup's been really limited, and he's been throwing a ton of fastballs that have been hit very, very hard. Slider's been problematic, too. I think it's a cheap price for a reason, but it's hard to look away from Seattle. Play really well at home, and they're going to play probably another low-scoring series here. I remember a few times they beat Houston, literally scoring in the first inning and not scoring again, and that was enough to win, I think, twice in the last series that Houston visited Seattle. But this is a big place for Houston to go into and try to potentially steal some momentum, steal the lead in the division back after Seattle's been in first place alone for a very long time. One of those where I think I probably need some more plus sign or a bigger plus sign on Houston to play here. But I think I'm very wary of Seattle struggling in the second half of this season. So before I get into the interleague and then, of course, give out best bets to close out the show, I want to mention a MLB second half king contest that we're promoting on all the Major League Baseball podcasts, maybe across all of the platform as well. Top 5 places win. It's the second half contest, runs from July 19th. This podcast is covering through the World Series. Minimum picks 100, maximum 250. So between 100 and 250 picks, net profit wins, unit totals, can play sides totals, of course. First place gets 500 pregame bulk dollars to spend wherever you'd like across the great handicappers at pregame.com. Could grab me for the rest of the season package. Could grab my full year package, of course, across all sports, all access. But first place gets 500, second 300, third 200, fourth place 150, and fifth place 100 pregame bulk dollars. It's free to enter. Go join today. Make sure you make 100 picks and give yourself a chance to win that contest and maybe get some fame alongside with it as well. Now I'll move to the interleague 2 games we got, and then close out with a best bet to get you out of here. Hopefully a big winner. Start the second half of the Major League Baseball season. Start in Cleveland, San Diego, visiting the Cleveland Guardians. Matt Waldron, the lone knuckleballer across all of Major League Baseball. He's visiting Tanner Bybee, and I think surprise team of the Major League Baseball season so far, to say the least. Cleveland, a -132 favorite at home, total 7.5, juiced very heavily to over. Big question here is, does Cleveland have the gas in the tank? Their bullpen's been awesome this season. They haven't been used as much as you'd think, but they've got some real issues in starting rotation. I don't think Tanner Bybee is their worst starter by any means. They've got two rotation spots they've been trying to figure out who to fill it with so far this season. But Bybee's fastball has been hit really hard, and that's a big issue for really any pitcher. If you can't throw a fastball, you just have to live on junk, and that's doable, especially with the great slider that Bybee does have. But ultimately asks a lot of questions, especially against a really good hitting team in San Diego, who certainly will be primed and ready to attack that fastball as much as they can. Matt Waldron on their side, he'll throw a knuckler like 30% of the time, which can certainly keep some teams off balance and certainly will be a big, big arrow in his quiver, an advantage even against a Cleveland team that hasn't seen him much. But I think the price is still pretty cheap on a Cleveland team and should be. But I just don't think there's enough here for me to want to back San Diego. Pretty much if you're backing San Diego here, you're hoping that Waldron, his knuckler will dance, or at least he's a little bit unfamiliar, though I feel like the rest of his repertoire is pretty limited. And going against the Cleveland bullpen, it's just really hard to beat them, especially away from home, when if you don't win regulation, you're a big underdog, I think, as you go into extra innings with the Manfred men and such. Last but not least on this card, the Boston Red Sox visiting the Los Angeles Dodgers. Got Nick Pivetta at Gavin Stone. Stone currently a -135 favorite at home. Over-unders 8.5. Choose very heavily to over. Might see a 9 before this first pitch is thrown late Friday night. Pivetta has been, he closed out the end of last 2023 Major League Baseball season in awesome form, but it's been really kind of up and down, which is probably how his career has gone. And really a lot of time, I think, revolves around how successful he is with his breaking stuff. Gavin Stone's never really been that impressive, but pitches for a great team, and that certainly worked out for him. Feels like a pretty cheap price for the Dodgers, even though the Red Sox will have a ton of fans in that crowd, of course, and also have had a really good run to the second half, or to close out the first half of the Major League Baseball season. I'm just not necessarily sure I believe in Boston yet. Their defense is really bad. Their bullpen has a lot of questions in it until Kenley Jansen, and Nick Pivetta has been too inconsistent. So I think the Dodgers is probably the side I want most in this matchup. Thanks for tuning in for a Baseball Friday just with yours truly. I didn't realize how tough it was. I feel like I need a million drinks of water. I'll do one now. But we're going to be back, should be on Sunday night. I think Munaf will be back for that episode. If not, I might be by myself, or maybe we have a guest in. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter at @the_G Warner if you want to get in, or just give us some ideas for anything else you'd like me to cover. Because going through the games with only one sort of opinion, I can see how it's a little bit limited compared to the others. But here we are, c'est la vie. And I'm going to get you a best bet. I'm just going to figure out exactly who's going to win us some money on this very, very important start to the second half. Want to get the mojo going. Got to get off to a great start and make sure that we're moving in the right direction for the second half of the season. Like I mentioned, in terms of promo codes, already mentioned it once in the podcast, but it doesn't hurt because every time you use it, make sure that we get another podcast episode out there. Use the promo code SWING20, good for 20% off for all listeners of this Major League Baseball podcast, good for 7 days from the podcast release. And you can use it. You can load up that cart. This is the biggest 20%. I don't know that I've seen a bigger discount code that we've given on any podcast I've done in this network for, I think, 4 seasons now. So make sure you go throw that in there, 20% off. Save as much as you can. Buy the season-long packages, which will be the most expensive, but you get the best bang for your buck. And you can certainly buy me and get my access to my football plays, both soccer field, soccer pitch, plus American pro football and college football as well, plus the rest of this baseball season and whatever else comes up, college basketball, of course, through the end of the year. Look into that if you want to follow along with @the_G Warner on Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, and on YouTube. But for my best bet on this Friday, July 19th episode, I want to make sure I get this ready to go so I can blast this in all the channels. Sorry, I'm used to Munaf leading me into this, and so I can kind of prepare on my own for all this. But it's probably time to get into it. And thank you all for putting up with me kind of going one-man band on this episode. But it's time to do it. Let's get into it. Hey, this is the @real_G Warner, Instagram, Patreon, Twitter, and on YouTube. This is the one-man band pregame.com Major League Baseball Friday, July 19th episode, featured on RJ Bell's Stream Preview. No Munaf tonight and his incredible record. I think he's 5-0 last 5 podcasts. He will be back very, very soon. I think my lowly 4-1 is still pretty good. And I'm sure all of you have done very well in our picks this entire season so far, and with a great close to the year. Use the promo code SWING20, good for 20% off for all purchases at pregame.com. Throw it in there. We get some credit if you use it. At least our bosses look on us a little bit more fondly. For my best bet on this Friday, July 19th, Major League Baseball episode, I'm going to go with Spencer Schwellenbach and the Atlanta Braves. They're a minus 132 favorite right now. I think Sonny Gray and St. Louis Cardinals, their bullpen's good, but that's a lot to ask to go in Atlanta and win the first game of the second half of this Major League Baseball 2024 season. That'll do it for this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back in some form or fashion on Sunday night. Hopefully my guy will be with me, but thank you all for the support and look forward to seeing you all very, very soon.
Recording stopped.